Good evening, dear viewers, and welcome to Watan Special Interview. This evening, our guest is Mr. John Gat Rاتر, the European Union representative in Jerusalem. The main focus of this interview will be the European Neighbourhood Policy Initiative and its annual progress report in respect to bilateral action plan signed by ENP and the Palestinian Authority. Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to have the opportunity to discuss a little bit the European Neighbourhood Policy which we have with the Palestinians.
Most Palestinians actually do not know a lot about the ENP. Can you please give us just an idea about it?
Of course. The European Neighbourhood Policy is the policy framework which the European Union has with the countries and partners in the region, both in the south, in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, but also in the East. It's a policy that was adopted after the enlargement of 2004, when the European Union enlarged from 15 to 25 member states. Mm-hmm. It was in many ways our response to those countries in the region, in the neighbourhood. So this is the neighbourhood policy. It's the policy framework. It's the policy framework which governs our overall relations with those countries and those partners in the region. Now, within the neighbourhood policy, which mm-hmm. is a framework, you have action plans with each of the different partners. So we have an action plan with the Palestinians, we have an action plan with the Moroccans. Mm-hmm. They're all different, respecting the principle of differentiation, because of course our partnership with the Palestinians is one thing and our partnership with the Tunisians is another thing. So it of course reflects very much the ambitions of the partnership, the ambitions that the European Union has jointly with the partner. Mm-hmm. So the action plan, which is the practical and concrete example of the neighbourhood policy, is something that we negotiate and jointly agree on. Mm-hmm. So the action plan that we have with you, with the Palestinians, is something that we have jointly agreed to.
Mm-hmm. But what is the philosophical idea behind the ENP?
Well, the neighbourhood is of course an extremely important area for the European Union, or for any other part of the world. I mean, your neighbours are also, and always will be, a very essential part of your stability, your economic prosperity, your environmental issues, your trade-related issues. All the issues which govern relations are, of course, even more important when it comes to your neighbourhood. So the philosophy is about partnership. The philosophy is really and truly about partnership. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are different levels of emphasis, different ideas, but ultimately it's about securing and building and consolidating a partnership between the EU and these countries, because it's the neighbourhood. So of course, with our partners and countries in our neighbourhood, they are by definition very important, mm-hmm. for the reasons I have explained.
Yes, and just recently the ENP just revised its policy in light of the social movements in some Arab countries and the revolutions there.
Indeed.
Does that mean that the EU policy was not on the right track before?
Well, I think we needed to adapt, and I think what we've done with this latest revamped European Neighbourhood Policy is try in some ways to address the changes which have taken place in the Arab world. Very important changes, where we are seeking to accompany these changes, not in any way to intervene in these changes. These mm-hmm. changes must come from the people themselves, and we are outsiders. Mm-hmm. We are outside, but we are close outsiders. We are partners through our neighbourship, through geography, and through other reasons. We are partners. So we've been forced to rethink a little bit our policies with the Arab world. But you know that the relations between Europe and the Arab world go back. We've had very long and very serious and very rich relations with the Arab world and Europe for many years. I mean, we share the Mediterranean Sea, we share geography, we share history, we share a lot. I mean, there is a lot in common. But we had to relook at the neighbourhood policy, and I think we had to also step up our engagement with civil society. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things which we learned, and we're still learning, of course, because I think what has happened in the Arab world has been momentous. It has been extremely important. And I think it's been very positive in many ways. But I think one of the conclusions we have drawn ourselves is the need to engage more and better and more effectively with civil society. And in Palestine, you have an active civil society. So one of the things I would like to do, as the EU representative to the Palestinians, is step up, is improve our engagement with civil society in terms of the neighbourhood policy.
Yeah. Before we start talking about the the occupied Palestinian territories, I just wanted to follow up question on the first, the basic principles for the neighborhood policy is to support in democracy, human rights, promote human rights, and this was clearly not evident in some of the Arab countries that witnessed revolutions, and yet there were partnerships with these regimes.
Indeed, we had of course partnership with these countries, but you know that a partnership goes beyond the issues you have mentioned. Of course, there are questions of economic convergence. There are questions of legislative convergence. You know that the European Union has legislation in all areas across the field. And I think there has been an approximation of our legislation and even integration into our single market, which I think, if you like, is one of the best things that the European Union has done, where we have managed to bring down borders within the European Union for persons, for goods, for services, etc. And I think what we're trying to do with the neighbourhood policy is give our partners a stake in that. Mm-hmm. So all our partners have a stake in that single market. Of course, there has to be some of the regulatory convergence, there has to be some of the convergence in other areas, but ultimately what we're saying is this is a partnership. And the partnership is built in a number of areas. And we're talking about democratic partnership, rule of law, the political partnership, we're talking about economic partnership, trade partnership, justice and home affairs, good governance, agricultural in some cases. Of course, it depends very much on the partner. You know, what the demands and what the needs are of each individual partners. But I should maybe also add one thing for your viewers, and that is that whilst there is the principle of differentiation inherent to the neighbourhood policy, there are also a number of common elements, because it is an approach we have for our neighbourhood. And whilst we respect the differences between, for example, and it's always dangerous to give examples, but for example, the differences between Morocco and Egypt, I mean, there are clear differences, there are also certain elements which are in common.
That's true. Okay, let us talk about the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people. Can you explain some of the difficulties and challenges that this policy may face, or in fact is facing, regarding the Palestinian territories, meaning there is no actual sovereignty for the PA over land or even decisions, or, you know, they're still under occupation?
Yeah, I'll start with the positive though, because I think what I would like to say, and I think it's important, is that we have very close and very strong relations with the Palestinian people. Also relations which go back. They have existed for a number of years. And we have a very close relationship with the Palestinian Authority. And when I say we have a close relationship, it means that we have serious dialogue. Mm-hmm. We have serious exchanges. We have serious discussions at all levels. So I have to say, and the first thing I would say in response to your question, is I would talk about a very close partnership. And that is reflected, if you like, in the implementation of the action plan. Mm-hmm. So we have managed to implement a lot of the action plan together because of the partnership we have, because of the relationship we have, because of the understanding we have. On the negative side, of course, some of those parts of the action plan have not been able to be implemented precisely because of the Israeli occupation. So there are limits. There are limits, which we recognize, of course.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but so why is it there in the action plan, if you know that it's not really feasible?
Because for us, the Palestinians are an important part of this, and we wanted the Palestinians to be part of the neighbourhood policy. We did not want to stop when it came to the Palestinians and not have a neighbourhood policy which also included the Palestinians. So we wanted to incorporate the Palestinians. And it's true what you say, that the situation is unlike other partners, where they are, of course, fully in charge and sovereign in all aspects, whereas, of course, the situation here is quite different, as we know it. But I think we still wanted to engage the Palestinians in the neighbourhood policy because the Palestinians are our neighbours.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of engagement, can you please just shed a light about the country programs that you are engaged in with the Palestinian Authority in terms of economic development? What is the highlight, if you will, of your engagement with the PA?
Well, you know, as I said, we've been engaged with the Palestinians for a number of years. We are continuously looking at how to improve the relationship, how to look at areas where we haven't looked maybe so much at in the past. So this is a continuous joint work of partnership. I think the private sector, for example, is one of the areas where we are very keen to work together with the Palestinian people, because I think everyone recognizes the entrepreneurial spirit that many of the Palestinians have, and what they have managed to achieve despite the circumstances. I think what we would like to do is to try and harness that in partnership with you, and to try and help provide the conditions in order for that economic viability, which is so important to any country, to any partner, not least the Palestinians, given the very serious fiscal issues. We have certainly been trying to help on working hand in hand with the Palestinians to give the possibilities to really develop a viable economy. And I think the private sector is, of course, a very important part of a viable economy.
Many Palestinians would ask, for example, why the EU, through the ENP maybe, or other channels, does not, for example, assist in building a factory, in actually assisting in, as you said, sustainable economy, where you can have production, where you can have employment, instead of the 2.9 million euros just spent for the extremely poor Palestinians, over 75,500. Instead of handing money, of making still and assisting people, but still keeping them at the same level. Why not really promote actual sustainable development projects?
Well, we have, through our overall assistance, interventions in many different sectors. And what we would like to do is to promote development. What we want to do is promote economic development. We don't want to do the job for the Palestinians. What we want to do is promote the conditions that allow for development. Part of our assistance does go to very poor people. And I think there is a justification in that. I think these are people who are very difficult to be employed in the labour market. I think there are some structural issues with trying to find employability for those people. So there are interventions. There are a cross-section of interventions. But again, a lot of our focus is on a number of reduced sectors, because the idea is to have an impact. The idea is to have an impact. And one of those areas is the private sector. Another area is the rule of law and justice. Another area is water and resources and infrastructure. So we are investing. We are working in Gaza. We are working in the Gaza Strip. So we are doing these big infrastructural projects. I have in my office, in the delegation, a section which is responsible for infrastructure. So we are engaged.
Can you give us examples of that?
Well, we're working with waste in Gaza, in the south of Gaza, near Rafah. So we're working with water, we're working with agriculture in the north of the West Bank, close to Tubas. So I think what we're trying to do is actually work closely with the Palestinians. And there's one principle of our engagement, and that is what we do is drawn up in partnership with the Palestinian Authority. Because what we want to do is put the Palestinian Authority in the driving seat. We do not want ourselves, as outsiders, to decide. What we do is done very much in a spirit of partnership.
That is exactly my question. And we have seen this problem, if the donor's money stops for political reasons or for any other reason, then you have no PA, meaning functioning financially. And this has been for almost 18 years since Oslo. What does it mean for the Palestinian economy? the Palestinian economy, although your progress reports points that for 2011 has grown 9.5%, but yet a number of families who are now under the poverty, extreme poverty line have increased. How do you explain this economically?
Well, I think the figure of growth which you refer to includes Gaza, which, of course, starting from a very low base, did experience some growth. The other issue is, of course, very...
And it's because of the tunnels, because of something that Europe...
Yeah, but you know, there was the growth, but of course, as I said, I mean, it did start from a very low base. I mean, for us, our support to the Palestinians is not in any way conditional on the political decisions which the Palestinian leadership may eventually take. I think we have made that very clear to our Palestinian friends, to our Palestinian partners, that we will continue with our assistance despite the decisions you may take with regards to the United Nations, for example, with regards to other issues, with regards to other political issues, because our partnership is strong and our partnership is close. So in many ways, our assistance is not conditioned. It is not conditioned. But I would also say that our assistance is part of our political engagement. And we are here for political reasons. We are here to help you, to assist you in developing a Palestinian state. That's what we're trying to do. And I think if you look at previous reports from serious and respectable organizations like the World Bank and the IMF, where they have recognized officially the readiness the Palestinian Authority has to assume statehood in certain areas. So there has been some contributions which have been effective. There have been some good results from our intervention. We are still working to create a Palestinian state, so of course, but the overall framework of our contributions, of our assistance, is political.
You mentioned political, and I'm sure that you know well that 62% of the Palestinian land in the West Bank is categorized as Area C under Oslo Accords, which means that it's fully under Israeli occupation's control. How can you, and you just mentioned that you support a viable Palestinian state, how can there be a viable Palestinian state, giving into consideration what you just mentioned about your political presence here and the reason you are here? How do you explain this?
Well, not without Area C, because Area C itself, I think, accounts for slightly more than 60% of the West Bank, which for us represents the territory on which a Palestinian state will be formed. For us, it's very clear. We have said on numerous occasions, officially and formally, the Council, that for us the term of reference is 1967. We have made our position very clear with regards to settlements. We have made our position very clear with regards to East Jerusalem. And we have made our position very clear with regards to Area C. In the context of viability, we are still committed to the two-state solution. We are still committed to the peace process through which we are supposed to arrive at this two-state solution. That is very much our basic line and our basic position. In order for that to work, Area C, of course, needs to come into the picture. So what we would like to see, in cooperation with all the different authorities involved, is Palestinian development in Area C.
But this is not in reality, but your relationship with Israel, you are also a partner with Israel, and part of your enlarged framework is also regional cooperation. What role does EU or ENP is playing in making a change, in making a difference in that area specifically?
Well, I think the atmosphere in the region is not an easy one today. I think it's a very difficult situation at large in the region. If you look
but
at
this has been, for, as I said, for a long time.
The Middle East has always been a source of concern and a source of instability. I think there is an even greater instability at the moment if you look at what is taking place in certain parts of the region. I mean, not least with what's happening in Syria. I mean, it's all very concerning, of course, the potential implications of all of this. Europe is, of course, built on reconciliation. It's built on reconciliation amongst European countries, which, you know, have fought each other for hundreds of years. But I think through the European Union we have managed to settle our differences in negotiations, through pieces of paper. And I think if there's one commandment in the European Union, it's thou shalt negotiate, because, you know, we spend hours and days sitting down around tables in Brussels negotiating.
But pardon me, it's different.
I'm coming. But what I want to say is that for us, regional integration is very important. I mean, we've had what was called the Barcelona process, the Euro-Mediterranean partnership, which again was an attempt to try and forge a regional partnership, which included the Palestinians as a full partner in 1995, I think, with Israel and all the countries in the region. So the EU has always had a regional approach. And for us, the peace process is not only about the Israelis and the Palestinians, but it's about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's about the Syrians, it's about the Lebanese, in addition to the Palestinians.
But it is a stalled peace process. Well, I'm not going to talk politics, but it is a stalled peace process. I just would like you to explain if the ENP, through the action plan or through your partnership with Israel, is it the right framework or framework to actually do something politically?
Well, the neighbourhood policy is the framework. The neighbourhood policy is the framework through which governs our relations, which governs the relationships between the European Union and the Palestinian Authority. Within that framework, of course, we have our relations. We have our issues, we have our areas of common concern, and we have our political relations, our economic relations, our social relations, our cultural relations. The neighbourhood policy itself is the framework. Within that framework, we are engaging with all our different partners to promote the kind of reconciliation that we would like to see in the Middle East.
Is there an accountability mechanism with your partners?
With the new neighbourhood policy, because, as I said earlier, I think we felt there was a need to engage more seriously with civil society. I think if you look at the new generation of action plans, and we're just about to conclude the new generation action plan with the Palestinians, there is a bit more emphasis on benchmarking, through which we will be able to monitor more seriously and more clearly whether the commitments we have jointly agreed to have actually been met. So we are looking at greater benchmarking. We are looking at greater monitoring. But again, it's in partnership.
Okay. Just one last question. What would you address or point out the main obstacles that actually face the ENP partnership with the PA? Well,
there are a number of potential obstacles, but I think one of the issues, apart from the issues we have already addressed, such as the occupation, is clearly the division which exists within the Palestinians, physically between the West Bank and Gaza, but also politically between Fatah and Hamas. So I think this is an issue which has, in some ways, been some form of an obstacle. I mean, you know, of course, our relations are with the Palestinian Authority, who we are working very closely with, as I have been saying. But I think we want to see, I think like many of the Palestinian people, the end of these divisions. I think to be able to continue to push out the areas where we have made some achievements, also in Gaza.
So some people, you're right, some people would say that actually the Western or the donor countries actually contributed to this this situation after Hamas won the elections. You know the whole story. I'm sorry. This is just a follow-up question. One of your recommendations in the progress report is you actually invite the Palestinian Authority to hold genuine elections. Do you think that we will have a repeated scenario of 2006?
Well, I don't know. It's difficult to say because we will come to that question when we come to that situation. So.
No, I don't mean who would win, but if the party that wins does not actually
No,
agree with the...
I think for us, for Europe, elections are important. I think we've said officially that we support the holding of elections.
And you would respect its outcome?
I think we would certainly respect its outcome. I mean, naturally, elections are an important exercise of democracy, which is something Europe believes in, of course, which is, I think, something Europe represents, and it's something we would like to do in partnership with the Palestinians.
One last
A last one.
word? No,
Yeah.
but if you have any...
No, I mean, I find it's a great privilege to be representing the European Union to the Palestinian people. I think despite the very difficult regional situation, despite the very difficult political situation, I think we have and enjoy a unique partnership in many ways, where I think there is real consultation with the Palestinians, both the people but also the leadership. So I think it's a very exciting place to be in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rاتر, and we're happy to have you at Watan TV.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.